Good afternoon. This is Vincent Kraft, TLS 358, Coach Interview. Hi, what is your name, your current and most recent coaching position, and share a little bit about your coaching history and accomplishments.
So my name is Zachary Marks. I'm an AYFL assistant coach. I've coached in Florida and in Arizona. Youth football is where I typically am at because that's the future of football.
Okay. All right. What is your favorite coaching moment or memory?
It wouldn't necessarily be one specific. It would be whenever I can get a kid's light to come on in a sport. If he didn't understand what his responsibility on the team was, when that light comes on, like that's the reason I enjoy coaching.
Awesome. And what would you say is your most difficult coaching moment or incident that you faced?
When kids quit on themselves, they tend to do that because it's the easy way out. That's difficult for me because I don't like when they don't believe in themselves. They're capable. They just don't realize what they're capable of.
Awesome. All right. What potential role and impact can coaches have in young people's lives?
So it falls in with that whole quitting on themselves. Like that's hard. The impacts coaches can have is we could have positive or negative impacts. Positive being giving them more confidence in themselves as an athlete, which will only further their success.
All right. And how do you think coaching has changed over time, especially considering the generational change?
So today, kids aren't as responsive to the yelling that we got as when we were younger. At least I know I did. They don't respond well to that, so you have to communicate with them. It's much easier to talk to them and show them a lot of respect initially, and they become more responsive to you as a coach.
Okay. And what kind of relationship do you try to create with your athletes, and why are relationships so important, generally speaking?
So I try to relate with them, talk to them, make it more of a one-on-one personal conversation when we're talking about things. They need to know what kind of expectations we have as coaches. So a lot of positive reinforcement, but also explaining when they don't do something correctly, explaining what exactly it was, not just do it again.
Okay. And how do you motivate different kinds of athletes and personalities?
So some kids, they respond well to just talking. Some of them respond well to, hey, we're going to run until we all get this right. Goals. If you give, most of the kids relate well to goals and respond well to that.
Okay. And how do you choose your team captains, and what roles do you see them playing in the team dynamics you try to create?
So usually there's multiple team captains, and anytime before the game when the coin flip happens, we send 4 kids out. Well, 2 of those kids are going to be the team captains that know what our intent is, whether we want to receive or defer. But the other 2 kids are going to be 2 kids that may be a little bit more timid or shy, because it helps boost their confidence and be comfortable. Because if they don't get that experience, they'll never get the experience.
Awesome. And how would you describe your leadership style?
I'm pretty fair. I'm very firm, but I try to relate to the kids and help them understand what it is that's expected. I tend to be a little bit more hard-nosed on some of the kids, but I think that they understand it, and I never do it in a malicious way. It's just so they understand their limits.
Okay. And in what ways does your personality impact the way you coach, both good and bad?
So I'm very passionate about football, so that's very helpful, but sometimes it can be hurtful as well, because sometimes when I'm really motivated about something and the kids aren't just having it that day, that can be detrimental to them because they're like, this guy just keeps yelling at us, or this guy keeps pushing us harder. So it can be a good and a bad thing all in one.
All right. Awesome. And how do you go about preparing, planning, and organizing as a coach? And why do you think that this is important?
So I always start with the basics. So fundamentals of blocking. foot placement, the basics. And then if we have some game tape, then we'll watch that and the errors we made. Then I'll make sure we do drills that emphasize that. I'll always look up drills that work to fix what it is we failed at. And I think it's really important because if we just go out and do the same thing every practice and never really teach the kids how to evaluate what it is they did in the past game, then they're not going to ever advance. They're just going to go through that regular routine.
Okay, awesome. And why is it critical for coaches to consider age, skill level, and other environmental contexts?
So as far as environmental, depending on what kind of field you're playing on, sometimes you get a practice field that is also a baseball field. Well, in that environment, you have to be cognizant of, I can't do these certain drills, these tackling drills in the dirt. So your environment plays a part of what drills you're capable of doing. And I think it's important to know what age group you're working with, because if you're trying to teach high school or collegiate level skills to 7, 8, 9-year-olds, they're just going to be lost and you're not building any confidence in them because you're coaching at too high of a level for them.
Okay. How do positive relationships with parents, administrators, fellow coaches, and other stakeholders?
So try to start that from the beginning of the season. I always tell the parents, if you ever have a question, either catch me before practice or after practice. I'll talk to you all day, all night about football, about practice, about how we do things. I think that's important because they're giving us their most important asset in their life to take care of on a field in a contact sport. So we have to develop that trust. Otherwise, there's no real good incentive for them to want to be there if the coaches don't care. The more they know you care, the more comfortable they are with their kid being on the field.
Awesome. And how can coaches influence athletes' lives outside of sports and encourage positive and pro-social behavior, as well as academic and professional success?
So being a coach helps teach kids resiliency, how to never quit, how to be successful, how to become confident in themselves, and teaching them how their hard work will pay off. It's much easier to do on a field or in a sport, a team sport, how their contribution helped everything. That adds to their confidence in academics and other aspects of life.
Awesome. All right. And how do you think you create an inclusive and safe environment for all types of athletes? Consider issues of race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, national origin, class, ability, and other markers of difference.
So I don't pay close attention to any of those things because they're all athletes. They're all kids who are trying to participate on the team. And if a kid does something wrong, I show them what they did wrong just the same regardless of who they are. Because that's not a factor. They're out there on a team and they've got to understand the player to your left and right is just as important as you are. So the more they understand that, they feel very comfortable in their team.
Okay. And now why should coaches be especially knowledgeable about Title IX?
So Title IX is about having both male and female sports at all levels. I think it's important because at some point we could be co-ed, and we need to understand the different rules and how to bring those together if we ever do go co-ed. But it's important for everyone to be included in sports.
Right. And how can coaches proactively minimize liabilities and risks generally?
So training, the more training coaches do in the off season or even during the season in heads up football, for example, that's a good example of we're reducing the possibility of concussions by the more training we do in it, the more we understand it, the more proficient we become, the better we can teach the kids to practice the skills.
Okay. And what are some effective and ineffective approaches to discipline?
So effective is could be, they can understand for every penalty we got in a game, we're going to run this many laps or this many suicide drills, down and backs, whatever it is, that could be effective. It becomes ineffective when you're excessive with it. If you go too far and you're just running kids to run them, they lose interest very quickly. Like, it doesn't matter how good I do or how bad I do, I'm going to get punished regardless. So that's ineffective.
Okay. And what considerations need to be made in regards to compliance?
So compliance, for example, showing up on time to practice. If you're coaching 8 and 9-year-olds, they're obviously not driving to practice themselves. So I always make it a point to let the parents know your child needs, your athlete needs to be at the field on time, because the rest of the team is waiting on them. So it's important that you address it at the right level. If it's the parents driving to practice, then the parents need to be responsible for that, because the kid can't get himself there on time if his parents are always late. And then not punishing the kid for being late. So football, we always run 1 lap before practice. If you show up late, you still run 1 lap and then you join in. It's not like you run 3 laps as a punishment because your parents didn't get you there on time. So that's important that we address it at the right level.
All right. And how can social media be a problem and an opportunity for coaches?
So it's a great platform for coaches to showcase their abilities, if it's in a positive manner, but it can also be a really bad thing because it could be taken way out of context, whatever it is that they're filmed doing or they say. It can be misconstrued if the whole picture isn't painted correctly.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate it.